Well, this is my 2001 Chevy S-10 pickup truck. It's a standard cab, short bed. I bought it as a running driving truck. It's supposed to have a Corvette motor in it. It's supposed to be a 5.7 and supposed to be ready to drive. So it's basically a drag truck. It's got 15.5-inch wide tires on it, 15-inch rims on it. So it's supposed to be a real hot rod. It's supposed to be a drag truck. It's got a fuel cell in the trunk. It's got a 3-speed automatic transmission in it. The LS motor was carbureted. I went to pick it up. Been on Facebook for quite a while. Went to take a look at it. Wouldn't send me much pictures, just the pictures that they had. Asked for pictures like inside the bed and stuff, but didn't get much reaction. Should have known better, but I went anyway. And picked it up at a swap meet. It was down there at a swap meet. They just happened to take it down that weekend. I should have walked away from the deal, but I seen it as a challenge, and I thought, well, maybe we can fix it and make it better. So here's where we're at. The motor's out of it, as you can clearly see, and we're going to try to fix all the problems. And let me tell you, there's a lot of problems. Some of the issues is, first of all, it's a truck motor. It's got 706 heads on it, and I'll show you that in a minute. The truck oil pan, if you know anything about these S10s, you can't put an LS motor with a truck pan in it unless you cut considerably amount out of the cross member. So you don't just cut the back side of it, but you also have to cut towards the driver's side. You have to cut a notch out of that. Well, they did cut the back of the saddle, but then they just put a piece of sheet metal over top of it. So that's not really safe. You're cutting a lot of the strength out of it, so you have to fix that. And the fact that the motor was resting, the oil pan was resting on the cross member was another issue. Another issue was the transmission was bolted with 2 bolts on the driver's side. There was only 2 bolts holding the transmission in. And when you crank the motor over, the motor was basically wobbling back and forth, so it would separate. The transmission and the flywheel was separating about, I don't know, 1/4 inch. How it didn't break the bell housing's beyond me. But when I went to pick the truck up, the guy messed around with it for about 5 minutes. Finally got it started after pumping it several times. Finally got it started. I looked at it and thinking, you know, I drove a long way to get it. It was in Indiana. Of course, it was one of those stories that I just got it. I'd done some trading off a buddy of mine, so I got it. But it's a good running truck, and it's only got 3,000 miles on the build. Well, I could tell that none of that was true by just looking at it. But I went ahead and took a truck for a challenge to do a build on it. So we're going to go over some of the details here, tell you exactly what is wrong with it, what they did wrong, and what we're going to have to do to fix it. So we'll look at that, and then we'll see what you think. Okay. To start off with, it is definitely a truck motor. Right here it is. And if we zoom in on those heads, let's try to find that head number. It's hard to see it, but they are 706 heads, as you can see. And like I say, it was a carbureted. All the accessories on the front of it are definitely truck. Here you can see the power steering bracket, and they actually had the serpentine belt was on wrong, and they must not have known what they were doing. Obviously they didn't know what they were doing, because there were several problems. One, it must have had an overheating problem. Let me tell you, I've only heard the truck run about 2 minutes. When they pulled it up to the trailer, the truck died, and they could never get it restarted. And he said it was out of gas. We did look in the fuel cell, and there was only about 1.5 inches in gas. I thought, well, okay. So I went ahead and winched it up on the truck. So I've never ever had, this truck has never ran for me being an owner. I've never driven it. The only thing I did was take it apart. So let's go over some of the details. The reason the overheating problem, they ran 2 cooling fans on it. They had a pusher and a puller. So they had one in the front and one in the back. Well, if you're a car guy, you know that don't work. One's canceling out the other one. The puller, that one you put in the front when you're going down the road, it basically slows the airflow down going through the radiator. And if you notice that there's no fan shroud on it. So the smaller one you see down at the bottom, it is the one that was on the front. It was the pusher, and then the puller's up there. So, but with the serpentine belt on there, most likely the water pump was running backwards. So they must have been thinking, oh, we got a Corvette motor. So some of the old Corvette motors, some of the LT1s, the water pump spun backwards. Another problem was the steering shaft on it. So you see this nice new steering shaft on here. Well, they didn't do that. I put that on there. So there's the old steering shaft, and then I put the Blackheart steering shaft on there. And the reason I did that is because they used a hammer, and they bought these $60 headers off of eBay, whoever did this job. And I'm assuming they came from eBay because they were warped, they didn't fit. So their theory was, let's tighten it down as tight as we possibly can to get them to seal up, which they did not seal. And I'll show you that also on the motor. As you can see right here, that it had an exhaust leak on it, and both sides was that way. So what they did is they actually put the wrong bolt. They put a 5/16 bolt in, which is right here. So I had to drill that out, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a time cert, but that it's basically a fancy helicoil, but I had to fix that because those on both sides, by the way, they were stripped out because the headers would not fit into the compartment. So then if you look around to the back of the motor, as I told you before, there was only 2 bolts, one here and one here, which was holding the transmission in. But if you look over at the other side, the bolt holes were completely stripped out. There was 0 threads in there. So I had to use a time cert insert kit to fix that. It is aluminum block, so I did fix that. So about $200 worth of time cert kits just to repair that. But we got that fixed. I have a new oil pan for it. We're going to change out the oil pan. The flywheel was another huge mistake. They drilled and ground in so much on the flywheel because they didn't have the correct spacer plate on the back of the flywheel, and they didn't have the correct, we'll say, torque converter, even though the torque converter will work, the torque converter that's in it. But if you notice, the torque converter is threaded. So what they did was they put the bolt through the back side of the torque converter and tightened it down, and then put a nut on the other side. Just the opposite of what it should have been. The bolt should have been going through the front. And how they got those in there, you know, that was crazy. So anyway, I went ahead and replaced the steering shaft on it. And I'm gonna have to do some work with the motor mounts on it, because like I say, it was sitting down way too low. And you can see right here where the motor had been moving back and forth and scraping onto the cross member. So had to do some work on that. Of course, the transmission leaks like a sieve. And the really nice thing about it is, you know, he must have been a plumber, the guy that's doing it, because you can see the copper line right here. That's the fuel line. That's a piece of copper tubing. So he must have had an extra piece in his, fixing his bathroom maybe, or doing something like that. But yeah, I mean, a little creativity. We can put some stainless steel over top of the copper, but yeah, we got to fix that. That's just crazy. So somebody did put this beautiful cow hood on the truck. So they decided to put the gauges up inside the cow hood. And you can see that. Now, I don't know if the gauges work or not, but they're in there. But you can't take the hood off because it's all hardwired in. And even the temperature line is in there, as you can see. But you can't remove the hood off the truck because all the gauges are hardwired in, unless you want to spend an hour to unwire everything and mark it. So, but somebody was really proud of the LS1. So anyway, So that ain't even a little bit of the problem. So the grill in it was pretty nice. It's right here. Got the grill sitting here, so I got it all taken out. And the truck is a beautiful truck. I mean, the truck looks really nice. It just looks like that whoever was trying to build the truck was 12 years old and had no idea what they were doing. So we will, the rear end, oh, you got to see the rear end. It is spectacular. The rear end is just, oh, this is the cream of the crop right here. Well, you like the exit exhaust? So they drilled holes inside the fenders, and you can see it's been a little hot, so it burnt the paint. But you know, this is supposed to be a drag truck, so let's take a look at these really nice looking Sportsman tires, and look how bad they are cracked. So this truck was never going down the drag strip. Nobody in their right mind would have dragged this truck with the tires on it the way they were. No way. So somebody built this truck, started on it, and never finished it. And I think they sold it, and somebody else decided they could finish the truck, and of course they couldn't. Now, the frame has been sectioned in the back, and so far, the only thing I can say is it looks like whoever did the frame knew what they were doing. So obviously the 12-year-old didn't do the frame, but it looks pretty good. But whoever mounted the rear end in it certainly did not know what they were doing. And I'll give you a little show of that. So you see that the truck is not sitting all the way down, but it's kind of down. Let's raise it up and let's take a look at that rear end. Okay, so we see the truck up and you see the tire. Now I know it's hard to look at it, but let's get from another angle. Let's get back here. Now you see the wheels all tucked over. You see that? And we're probably, I don't know, maybe a foot off the ground or something. Look how much distance we have between the wheel well. Let's go over to the other side. You'll like this. This is well worth the wait. Ooh, what happened there? Look at that. The rear end is hanging at about a 30-degree angle. So the tire is up in the wheel well on the passenger side, and it's 12 inches out of the wheel well on the driver's side. Now, was that a running driving truck that somebody took down the drag strip? Were they racing this truck like that? Let's look underneath of it and let's see what we can see. So, can you see how the rear end's hanging in the truck? What a freaking nightmare. What a nightmare. Who in the world would have ever come up with the idea of thinking that mounting that rear end in there like that would be okay? And of course the wheelie bars on it are broke. The wheelie bars are broke on it. Whoever was building this truck had no idea what they were doing. None. Of course, they say the truck was from Texas, but we know that's not true. They probably picked that plate up all along the road. Okay. So here's the bed. Here's a bunch of the parts. They put the battery back there in the back. I put this tonneau cover on it because it's kind of embarrassing. Somebody comes over and sees this truck. This is not something I'd want somebody to see. But I got thinking about it, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to do a video on it. There's the intake. There's some more of them cheap headers. Now somebody bought a really nice hat for the carburetor. But yeah. And then here's the spark plugs that I took out of it. As you can see, they had different kinds in there. So after I took the plugs out of it and realized that it was soaked, 3 of the cylinders were soaked in oil, I knew that there was no sense even doing anything with it to take the motor out and to rebuild it. So that's what I've done. The motor's out of it. we're gonna try to fix all these problems. We're gonna try to fix the rear end. I'm sure the brakes doesn't even work on this truck. I may be surprised, they might work, but I would be just shocked to find out the brakes work. The interior looks nice. Now, the gentleman I bought this off of actually owned an upholstery shop, and he said that he replaced the seats that used to have racing seats in it, so he replaced them. So, probably true, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, I did contact the people that I bought the truck from through his son. His son was the one that posted it. I contacted him, crickets, wouldn't even respond. I messaged him and said, listen, the truck's not as advertised. The truck it has a truck motor in it. The truck never ran and drove. I mean, if somebody drove around a block, maybe, but nobody drove it down the drag strip. Nobody had this truck past 40 mile an hour, I can tell you that. But yeah, she's a mess. And like I say, it's a pretty truck, but it's a mess. Everything about it needs fixed. And we're gonna fix it. We're gonna take this truck apart and we're gonna fix it right. And make sure this truck is a good running, driving truck. So, you folks let me know what you think. Have you guys ever ran into buying something like this when you drive a ways to pick it up and you get there and it's not what was advertised? And I think this is one of the craziest things that I've ever done, to buy something that usually I buy stuff that's in pieces or in somebody's garage or basement, in their pole barn, parts out of their attic. But I guess I was naive and didn't realize that, you know, people would do this. They would just throw something together like that and call it a running, driving truck. And they did start with a beautiful body. And who knows, the truck might have been a drag truck at one time, but it didn't have that motor in it. And it didn't have the exhaust that they had on there. So I did buy some Blackheart exhaust manifolds for it, cast, just for that. So we'll get those on there. Once I get the engine back from the engine builder, then we're gonna proceed forward with this. So I think I'm gonna leave it carbureted. I'm not 100% sure, but we gotta change the oil pan. We're gonna change the valley pan off of it here. We're gonna change that out, put a CTI on there, and try to fix this truck where at least it's reliable to drive. Maybe it won't be a drag truck, but it'll be something reliable that you can hop in and go. I did buy a tonneau cover to put on it, and it looks pretty good on there. The truck looks good when the hood's closed and you don't see the 12-year-old workers that's been working on it. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some 12-year-olds out there that know what's going on, but let me tell you, the guy that put this in did not know the difference between a 3/8 bolt and a 10mm bolt. They have no idea. And this is the problem that people run into when they try to do these vehicles and they try to put LS swaps in them, and they don't realize the bolts, the metric, the pitch on the thread. If it's a metric bolt, if it's a 1, a 125, or a 1.5, they don't understand all that, and they don't understand torque specs on it, so they just crank them down as tight as they can. When you're trying to put a 10mm bolt in a piece of aluminum, you don't put a 3/8 bolt in it. And you just don't, just because it don't tighten up, don't call that good. Anyway, folks, I hope, I'm not trying to call anybody out on this truck. I just want to show you what's out there on Craigslist and why you got to be careful. And I'll do a follow-up on this, and maybe you guys will see how the truck turns out, or maybe I'll do another one just once I get the motor back or something. But we'll go from there. You folks have a great day. Thank you.